Let's get started. Welcome to the Tuesday Nighters. Welcome to the book club, both of which fall under the Church of Jesus Christ, which we also welcome you to. But this is the Church of Jesus Christ under these two subtitles, the Tuesday Nighters and the book club. The book club is something we've put together over the last 91 weeks, if you will. And I find that an amazing accounting. And next week, I'm going to have an entire accounting of how long we've been doing these Tuesday Nighters, just because it's fun to do. But anyway, 91 weeks is 21 months or a year and 3/4. And that's just the book club. That's not Tuesday Nighters. And I was unaware how long we've been doing this, but it is a year and 3/4. That equals 159 hours of spiritual talk. I find that just glorious. Anyway, we're in a piece called the suggestion box, as I told you earlier, which is your suggested chapters to read. This particular week, we're in John 6. And I'm sorry gently sorry. I don't want anyone to jump to conclusions. Gently sorry that our sister Terry Bravo isn't able to be with us. She made a wonderful decision to support one of the families in the branch and go see a concert of one of the young people. But I know she wanted this particular chapter and wanted to be a part of it. So I just say that we're going to miss her. So we're going to push into this next chapter after a couple brag slides, if you will. 274 chapters, 6,900 plus verses, 192,000 plus words you've read. Every chapter, every verse, everything you've highlighted, everything you've made put a part of your focus for your life, every effort made. And certainly all our discussions are all purposed on the glory of God. And for that, I'm sure God is pleased with you. Here's what you've done. I'm not going to stay on this one, but that's what you've done. Look at the studies you've done over those umpteen months. All right. John 6 is one chapter, 71 verses, 1,500 words. I promised that I was going to bring something to you in case we don't get to Joshua for next week. 71 verses is a lot. If we don't finish this chapter, because again, I'm going to try to be really conscientious of the time. I don't want to exhaust anyone. I know that I'm used to talking way into the morning on things, so I want to be conscientious of the time, and I don't want anyone to get to a point where it becomes an irritant. So we're going to watch the clock. If we have to do chapter 6's part 2 next week, that's what we'll do. We may finish it at all, but I'm telling you, the deeper you dig into this particular chapter, especially in the interactions between Jesus and his followers, there is some very dramatic moments in this chapter, none of which I'm going to highlight in my talk. Tonight I'm going to go a different direction, and that's why I don't know where you're going to take us in your conversations. So my introduction is not going to look like the past introductions at all. What I'm instead going to do is kind of a higher level general comment about and so I'm going to present out of this chapter, using this as my springboard, present fragments in maybe even full verses, but also fragments of verses to suggest that there are other angles to look at these verses. Sometimes they come into our conversation, but often if we read them in this manner, we'll find those different angles. So this week, I am assuming, and I commend you for this, that you've read many of the literal meanings in this chapter. And I found all 71 verses great. And I found especially, as I said earlier, the interactions. But I'm asking you to open your mind to exploring further, considering whether or not there are secondary interpretations to some of the things we've been reading and will read in the future. And if so, could these secondary interpretations be like the Old Testament types and shadows that I think you know about? I'm going to give you a quick definition of what those are in case you don't. But here's an example of what I mean. Here's what we know recorded in the Old Testament. Joseph, once separated from his family, which his family was Israel, the father Israel, and the other 11 sons. And now at this point of their life, their families, he invited his father, his brothers, Israel's sons, and their families into a foreign land. Because at this point, Joseph was now in Egypt. He invited them to feast physically. Invited them to a feast where they discovered that their brother still lived, their brother wasn't resentful, and that he loved his family and wanted them to feast together. This is one of those types. Now, these types and shadows that we read about are to be repeated, else they're not a type of anything. Okay, so that we believe Joseph will again invite his father and the brothers, not certainly literally, and not certainly literally Joseph, but the Josephites will invite the house of Israel to another dinner. And again, they'll gather in a foreign land. Believe that to be somewhere in the Americas. And again, the purpose will be to feast, but this time not physically, but spiritually. That's a type and a shadow. Okay, a type and a shadow is when a person, event, or object, which is normally found in the Old Testament, or at least by way of time designation, to foreshadow or prefigure, if you will, something in the future. And often that shows up, or even normally that shows up in the New Testament. I'm asking you to look at the writings tonight in the New Testament and see if they aren't, in some way or in some things, types and shadows, possibly of things in our time. Okay, it goes on. My search into type and shadow, so I had something to present to you tonight, said that they're normally less perfect symbols of a more perfect reality or event that comes later. Okay, there is an ideal example right in the middle of John 6. It's in John 6, 29 through 36. I'm going to present a little bit of that now so you understand what I meant by that in this chapter. Then I'm going to take some snippets, and that's going to be our intro tonight, just to get you thinking. Doesn't necessarily going to be to drive our discussion tonight, but just to get you thinking about secondary interpretations to the chapters we're reading. So starting in 29, I'm just going to read you what I broke out and laid into this slide. This is the work of God, that you believe on him whom he hath sent. And this is Jesus Christ talking about himself. They said therefore unto him, what sign showest thou then, that we may see and believe? What dost thou work? Our fathers did eat manna in the desert. It's such a perfect layup in this conversation. As it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat. Then Jesus said unto them, verily, verily, I say unto you, Moses gave you not that bread from heaven, but my Father gives my Father gives you the true bread from heaven. Now we know the manna was laid there outside their tents, given from heaven. But Jesus Christ said, Moses gave you not that bread from heaven, but my Father giveth you the true bread from heaven. Again, speaking of himself, for the bread of God is he which cometh down from heaven and giveth life unto the world. Then said they unto him, Lord, evermore give us this bread. And Jesus said unto them, I am the bread of life. He that cometh to me shall never hunger. He that believeth on me shall never thirst. But I said unto you that you also have seen me and believe not. Now, surely this was not merely a reference to the physical aspects of bread, but again, we only see this if we go to a secondary interpretation, a different way of seeing bread. So I want you to consider that as I go to the next slide as well. This, again, I'm just kickstarting your hearts, kickstarting your brains, not necessarily for tonight's discussion, though we can, but more so as we continue to read and continue to grow spiritually, we search for maybe deeper meanings in some of the things we find. So in verse 5, it said, when shall we buy bread that these may eat? This is when they didn't have anything and he was sending his disciples out. They were simply asking, as you can see, where do we buy this bread so that we can feed these people? What we learn is from the very next verse, and you'll have to read verse 6 to understand what I'm telling you, explains that Jesus already knew the answer, but he asked anyway. So I'm asking you tonight, is there some corresponding spiritual question being asked? Do any of these words used in this sentence have another meaning, as an example? Whence? From what source? By, is there something else that by might mean? Is there something else that bread might mean? Is there something else that these may eat might mean? And eat, what does eat mean in a spiritual context? I'm not telling you I know any of these answers. I'm just asking you, is there more to this? In verse 9, it says, what are these among so many? I'm asking you tonight, in our time, is there another small amount of something or someone being referenced here on a secondary level? And if so, in relation to what larger amounts? What are these among so many? Because remember what happened. This small amount became great enough to feed all. Is this also a type and shadow of our times? Verse 12, gather up the fragments that remain, that nothing be lost. Do any of these words have any significance? Fragments that remain, these fragments that remain, and that nothing be lost. Verse 13, filled 12 baskets with the fragments of 5 barley loaves. Let me ask you this. Could the numbers 5 and 12 represent more than just loaves and baskets? Verse 26 says this, ye seek me not because you saw the miracles, but because you did eat of the loaves and were filled. Could these words, loaves, eat, filled, mean more than just physical applications? Are there other things to factor in on these verses? Verse 58 said this is that bread which came down from heaven, not as your fathers did eat manna and are dead.
Did I get anything?
He that eateth of the bread shall live forever. Again, this was certainly not simply or merely a reference to the physical attributes of bread. In verse 70, it says, Jesus answered them, have I not chosen you 12, and one of you is a devil? Is Judas being called evil? And when Jesus Christ says this, is he saying that Judas was evil from inception, or is being used by Satan for his purposes?
Oh, Mark and Jim.
Tonight, we may not come to conclusions. I want to make sure that you understand that to any of these questions. As I told you earlier, we may not even discuss these, whether it's the verses or parts of the verses tonight, words, phrases, etc. I only ask, as you read forward next week and the weeks after, and maybe tonight, that you consider that the first application is not always and not only the last application. There may be layers of second, third, and fourth. Said differently, bread is not always just bread. Even to the purest of definitions, bread has multiple definitions. But I mean spiritual and natural. Bread is not necessarily bread. Or said even more differently, as our brother played in the song before we opened today, climb higher, the good shepherd cries, higher, for the pasture is much sweeter there. I believe that the physical and literal translation of this chapter is fabulous, but it might get even sweeter if we climb just a bit higher.